We are live. We'll give people a few minutes to start joining here. We will see.
Did we lose Jimmy?
I just lost you both for a second.
Today. It's always cool to see where folks are calling in from. And then throughout the webinar, Ryan and Megan will be running through a series of slides. If you have questions about specific slides, drop that question in. I'll do my best to queue it up in context. Everything else we'll save for the end. As you have thoughts, questions, whatever, please feel free to use the chat as much as you'd like. Cool. Ryan, Megan, thank you so much for doing this. Verblio has just been such a wonderful partner to Superpath. We really appreciate you. You've also done an interesting deep dive on AI, which is, kind of on everybody's minds these days. Really looking forward to diving into this. One thing I'll just call out before I hand this over to you is that this is a tool agnostic webinar, which I'm excited for. It's just like helps us get kind of like an unbiased look at how teams can and probably should be using AI. So anyways, with that out there, I'll throw it over to you guys. Please, if you don't mind, Ryan and Megan, introducing yourselves and maybe just give us a quick overview of Verblio, where people might go to learn more.
Yeah, our pleasure. We're excited. We got a slide for this, so we'll just jump right in.
Okay, cool.
So I'm Ryan Sargent. I'm the director of content at Verblio. I'm an aspiring podcast host. I'm here for the hot takes. I'm a content marketer. I'm also a recovering jazz musician, which means I love content. I have done content production ranging from like mixing and mastering avant-garde jazz albums to academic peer-reviewed papers to the old B2B ebook. So I love this stuff. Being a marketer pays a lot better than being a jazz musician. Fun fact. So that's why I'm here now. And working for Verblio has been quite a journey. Verblio produces more than 100,000 pieces of content a year for 1,000 clients a month, including hundreds of agencies. And so we get the chance to really kind of see how the sausage gets made. And that's been a really cool thing to see behind the scenes, and getting to see kind of how everyone else builds content and what's important has been a big part of my job. So I'll turn it over to Megan.
Yeah. So I am Megan. I was a freelance writer previously. Before that, I did some interning with computer science and programming in college. So I kind of span both sides of the brain here, I guess. So I was a writer actually for some of our Verblio clients on the platform. And then I joined as a content marketer, and I might've just frozen, so I apologize. Hopefully you can still hear me. And cool. And in September, my job actually changed from doing content marketing for Verblio to focusing full-time on how we should be using AI, and figuring out how that was going to be affecting content, and what we needed to do to kind of get ahead of that and start using it. So again, we've been doing this since September, building out processes for this. Obviously, this has gotten a whole lot more traction in the last few months with ChatGPT, but it's been an exciting ride, and just a fantastic team to be a part of.
Okay, we don't think we're going to change your mind with this webinar. The goal is not to change your mind. I think if we hope to convince you of anything, it's that building hybrid content with AI and humans requires a lot of work, takes a lot to figure out, especially if you're going to do it at scale. And I think that it's possible is what we want to convince you of more than anything. Not trying to change your mind about AI, whether it's good, bad. I do have a philosophy degree. I will not get on a soapbox about the future of technology. With that in mind, this webinar is for people who want to see how the content gets made. We have been building hybrid content for close to 6 months now. Kudos to Megan for getting on that early. And this is for people who want to build quality. As I think we've all started to see, it's clear that bad content is not going to cut it anymore, because anybody can build pretty okay content now. And so we're going to talk about how to level it up. If you think AI content is going to solve all your problems or totally put you out of a job, this might not be the webinar for you. And so we'll start with a State of the Union. As you know, AI content is already here. It's everywhere. This remains one of my favorite bad LinkedIn screenshots because this person has screenshotted someone else's tweet, put it on their own LinkedIn, and then gotten 1,000 engagements. And something's trending at that point, I guess, is all that there is to say. And then, of course, we all have ChatGPT accounts and use it to do important, productive, work-related things. I also love how big the hype train has gotten because we've almost stopped looking at the implicit bias of the people that are posting. So I love Lily Ray. Lily Ray is one of the smartest, most badass SEOs and human beings out there. She is brilliant at everything she does, including DJing. And she posted about how great the Bing chat tool is because it found her article. And it's like that there's something there, right? Like you can't just post about how great AI is when it does something you like. And I think a lot of folks are doing that, right? Kieran Flanagan's doing this as well. And I'm not just trying to call people out, but I am here for the hot takes. So, right, he's the CMO of Zapier. Of course, he loves ChatGPT and GPT-4. They partnered with Zapier. Zapier is going to become the gatekeeper and the arbiter of essentially the app store for these integrations. And so as the CMO of Zapier, he has a vested interest in thinking that GPT-4 is the cat's pajamas. So keep that in mind when you're scrolling LinkedIn. People talking about AI often have a vested interest in AI. Megan and I have a vested interest in AI. We are building AI content for customers. So that's State of the Union Part 1. State of the Union Part 2 is that there's already a lot of pollution in the internet that is garbage content. It's everywhere. We, as content marketers, we know this. AI is going to make it worse. There's going to be more crappy content in the world than ever before. And a lot of it's going to come straight from an AI tool. And so I think everyone in Superpath, right, knows, in this community knows, if you take something from the AI, it's not going to, and just publish it, you're not meeting a minimum quality bar. This is not going to work. Like, don't do that. Other State of the Union things. If you're a CEO, you probably think AI is pretty darn cool. If you want to really appeal to investors right now as a CEO, you need to make sure that 1, you're not working for the government of China, and 2, you have an AI powered app. These are really, this is the thing to do today. SEO, not dead, I think, most importantly, but it is okay to admit that SEO is maybe peaked. That like SEO and content marketing have been the dominant channel for so long, and we've been living the good life as content marketers. We've had it easy. We've had our skill set be so greatly valued in the demand gen space and in acquisition and marketing in general. And maybe that won't always be the case. It doesn't mean we're not still doing really good stuff and really effectively leading to business outcomes. So SEO is not dead. It's just not as good as it was in 2017. And even if we are mostly dead and not all dead, we can still be the hero and storm the castle. We just have to be clever about it. I could go way deep on the Princess Bride analogy here. Every time I read an AI carousel on LinkedIn, a year of my life gets sucked away. And in the promo for this webinar, I said I would talk about why I think that the take that you will be replaced by a marketer who uses AI better than you is overrated. It's because sometimes obsolete channels still work pretty well, like this billboard in Denver promoting Meow Wolf. I Googled this. I wanted to figure out what the hell was going on here. This like cool runic squiggly thing. Also, shout out to our mutual friend Brewery. Your walk-up window was a great friend to me during COVID. There's also, of course, the idea that as much as marketing changes, it also stays the same, as is evidenced by this amazing influencer marketing campaign from the early 90s. And on top of that, just because we're getting new tools doesn't mean that our job has changed. And I think that just as farmers continued to be farmers when tractors came around, there's a huge opportunity for a new brand and new technology. And you can produce some pretty amazing brand experiences, even with the new technology. But on top of that, like, just because farming is different than it was 200 years ago, and there are fewer farmers, doesn't mean that farming is gone. And so this is not the death of SEO or the death of marketing. It's funny to think about. 20 years ago, there was no such thing as a social media manager. And now pretty much every company has one. I've got at least 20 years left in my career. I mean, if I'm done in 20 years, it's because I'm living the good life. Catch me at the swim up bar. But more changes are coming. It's really crucial that we all learn to adapt and grow and access new tools. So that's the approach that we're going into this whole AI world with, and I think that's important. Where does that leave us? It means that quality matters. It means that everyone needs to use AI to make better content rather than contribute to the ocean of pollution that is out there. This is a good thing. Like, as a content marketer, I'm so happy about this. Like that there's a renewed focus on quality. Props on the quick pivot, everybody. Like, I'm proud of us. Like, and at the same time, I think we can produce high quality content without it being art, without it being like viral every time, and this like pristine piece of thought leadership. So we're going to come back to that in a second. And then the last food analogy, one of our favorite things to say at Verblio is that it's hard to do things well at scale. When you try to produce a lot of something really good, it's hard. And that's why wedding food is often not so great. As somebody who plays in a wedding band and goes to 20 wedding receptions every year, wedding food is not very good. And millennials, we've contributed so much to the world. The donuts on the pegs thing, that's not our best work. So yeah, and okay, I'm done with the soapbox. AI tools are going to save us time. I think everyone's probably heard it described at this point as like an ocean of interns or infinite help. But that means that it's on us to improve quality, right? The AI is not going to do that for us. And what you do with that time savings ends up being what's most important in a world of AI and content. So Megan is going to talk about some things that you probably already know about AI and some use cases for content.
Yeah, I'm going to go pretty quickly through this because even since like we first gave this presentation a couple months ago, like a lot of this has become hopefully common knowledge. I think the highlights here are just that most AI content has been created with some generation of GPT, whether that was GPT-3, whether that's the current GPT-4. All the stuff is still the same, except as it evolves, we are just adding more nuance. So while AI can't, fact check itself or cite sources, now we do have things like Bing and other technology that is adding in some of those abilities. So all these points are still the same, they're still true, but we're getting more nuance as the technology evolves. That's going to continue to be the case, right? The limitations of AI yesterday are going to continue to kind of be pushed forward, and that's super exciting. But it's important to keep in mind that those limitations are still there, even if they're just not as pronounced, which in some ways it makes it almost easier to miss them, right? It's the better AI does at generating human-sounding text, the more likely we are to just read it without actually fact-checking. But we've got to keep in mind that that's still something we need to do. It still has those limitations in terms of its training data set and that it hasn't seen the most up-to-date information. And so all of those things are really good to keep in mind as we move forward. And then content use cases. These are kind of the big places where we are using AI versus not using AI today. So we all probably create lots of different types of content, right? So for some of that content, if it's mostly SEO focused, if it's top of funnel content, what is content? Like what is X for different things? For all those types of content, AI can be super helpful and powerful. The theme and variations, that could be something like franchises, right? If you're creating content for different franchises, if you are creating, Ryan will talk about in a second, but if you're doing kind of like a hub and spoke model, so you've got your kind of main content and then you're building out all of the content around that, it can be really, really powerful there. Where it's not going to do so well is thought leadership. Again, AI is not designed to have original thoughts. Like by definition, it's trained to write something that sounds like what has come before, which means it's not going to produce something original. So keep that in mind. Obviously, current events, it's limited to what it was trained on. Also, things like highly technical content or anything that's going to require anything in the YMYL space where that fact checking becomes just that much more important, or having that expertise opinion included in that content becomes more important. AI is going to be less helpful on those. And so it's just a kind of almost portfolio theory of like, okay, there are going to be places in your content workflow where it's helpful, places where it's not, important to know what those are.
And then there's content strategy. And I think having a really clear strategy that's optimized in itself for this hybrid content, this combination of humans and AI, is that's like the starting place. That's the first step in building content that really makes, or in setting up, you're setting yourself up for success with this hybrid content. If Megan said I had to say this, if you screenshot one slide, screenshot this one. This might be the most boring slide visually in the presentation, but she says that it is the most informative. So some ways that you might consider, setting up your content strategy specifically to make use of hybrid content. First, hub and spoke. I think we all know how to do hub and spoke. We all done hub and spoke. This is tried and true. This is our bread and butter. But we all could use a few more spokes, right? And so having AI cover all of your spokes with the knowledge that you're going to include humans in the writing process and add examples and beef this content up before you publish it, means you can have a much more robust hub and spoke strategy than you could before. The hub piece of content still needs to be human created, right? Like this is where you need to put most of your energy. This needs to be this killer piece of content, but now you can attach more spokes. And that sends all the right signals to Google while also taking advantage of the time savings, right? So these are all going to be ways to take advantage of that time savings. The other one would be a lot of medium difficulty keywords. I feel like these get lost in the shuffle. It's easy to argue for targeting low difficulty keywords, right? Long tail stuff, because it's easy to rank for. And then you get to go into a quarterly review or whatever and say, look at all this stuff we're on page 1 for that we weren't on page 1 for before. Every time we write an article, we rank. And that looks really good and feels really good and drives business traffic. It's great for bottom of funnel stuff. At the same time, sometimes it's worth putting your effort behind ranking for something that's really difficult and really investing in that. That also drives a lot of traffic. And I think we're so used to going after those ends that we miss the middle. And AI can help with that. Often medium difficulty keywords require more volume. They require a better internal linking structure. And so you can now target those things as part of your content strategy, knowing that volume of content won't be the problem. You have AI on your side to help with that. Top of funnel content, we always have more ideas in the backlog, right? There's some Asana board somewhere where you have all of the things that you wish you could publish for the top of funnel, and it's impossible to prioritize them. AI can help with that by giving you the time to build more of that stuff. Another way to approach it is kind of from the audience-focused view. What is your audience doing on ChatGPT today? Because AI can produce that content clearly. So if you were to produce that content with AI and then improve it with your own content skills, you're going to end up with a better answer, a better response for something that essentially already has search intent with your target audience. And then my favorite of these is the bet strategy. This is a Mark Rogers thing. From Mark Rogers is the director of content at Animals. And a bet strategy is where you look at trends to figure out what you think will generate more search volume in the future. And you build the content for that before the volume exists and take advantage. An example would be an eclipse, right? You know this is coming. You think there's going to be a lot more search traffic about this event in the future. There's nobody searches eclipse now. There's not an eclipse today. So you're going to build the content for that in advance and then have the domain authority and everything on the subject matter. And when people do start searching for eclipses, they will find your website. That is a very niche example. But the strategy is super underrated. And the hard part is, of course, figuring out what the trends are. That's a human task, right? Use Google Trends for this, not Google Search Console, by the way. And if you can do it, you can build the content in advance with AI. And it lets you make many small bets instead of one large bet. If you go all in thinking that search volume for this one thing is going to improve in the future and you build it and then the search volume doesn't improve, you've wasted your time. AI helps you build lots of content so that you can target many different potential future trending keywords and get the most bang for your buck. So those are some use cases for hybrid content. How do you build this stuff? How have we been building the stuff? We've been trying to get the best of both worlds between humans and robots. These were the best of both worlds references that we found. I'll let you decide which one's Megan and which one's me. And Megan's going to go over all of our attempts and successes and where we've ended up.
Yeah. So
can I pop in with a quick question, Megan, before you jump in? Some folks were asking if you have examples of hub and spoke strategies created or at least assisted with AI. If you do you have a link that we could possibly share with people?
I can come up with one. I think, yeah. I don't have a link off the top of my head. The big example for me is like something. So here's an example. I don't have a link to this, but chess strategy or learning to play chess. Right? You need a really, really good hub article for that, because it needs to be more than just the rules of the game. It needs to have some beginning strategy. It needs to have links to articles on history. It needs to have links to articles on other resources for advanced players, puzzles, right? So there's this huge world and web of information related to learning how to play chess, and that's going to take a lot to cover, right? So maybe you now, instead of needing to have a human write every single article on every single chess opening or opening strategy principle, you could have AI help generate a bunch of those, right? Chess openings haven't changed in thousands of years. So getting a few hundred words on each of these is something that AI could be a real help for, a time saver. You still need to go edit them, you still need to go check them, but now your hub of how to play chess is going to have a lot more stuff supporting it than what you would be able to produce on your own just as a human by yourself. Megan, does that example?
Great example.
Yeah, and one thing I want to add to that is if you, now with GPT-4, you can do this, but you can also feed in the hub page to GPT-4 so that as it's writing out those spokes, it will also do a better job of just matching your brand voice and matching that structure and that sort of thing. So that's a cool thing with that is possible with GPT-4 that wasn't possible before because of token limits. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit too. But that's one tip I would recommend for if you're doing that strategy.
Amazing. Thank you both. And Megan, sorry for cutting you off.
Appreciate it. Yeah, so we've been working on this since about September. We're figuring out the best way for doing this at scale of like involving the AI, involving our pre-existing network of human freelance writers, and figuring out the best of both worlds. Sorry to say that again. And this has been basically just an ongoing iterative process. So when it very first started, some of you may recognize this. This is the OpenAI's Playground. This was back on Text DaVinci, the 002 model, which was even before the GPT 3.5 update last winter. So this was early on. We're looking at, okay, what's the best prompts? What are the best parameters that we need to use to get a workable blog post that we can then give to a human writer to improve? We've iterated on this a lot. Honestly, I don't even know how many versions there have been at this point, and it feels like kind of every week we're rolling out something different. But today, what our process looks like, this is basically our current iteration of our process. Again, this is new as of like this week. It looked different a couple weeks ago. And Ryan, you can speak to that, but I'll quickly hit the flow that we've got going here is we get our briefs from our clients. We work with a lot of agency clients, not only agencies, but that's a dominant piece of our client base. So we get the brief that goes to both the human writer and to our AI. And then depending on who the client is, what's included in that brief, that dictates the prompts that we use with the AI. So for example, if we are doing something local, we want to give the AI that geography and make sure that we're going to be talking accurately about that specific location. For other things, it might be more important to give guidance on the voice and tone, depending on the brand and their guidelines. But those prompts are all kind of custom for each of our clients. The AI will create the outline. Humans can adjust the outline as needed. The AI then writes the introduction. The human is able to kind of edit that to make sure, okay, from the get-go that we are really nailing the voice of this client. The AI then writes the rest of the article, and then the human is editing and reviewing that final content, again, going back to the brief, making sure we're hitting all the points that the client wanted, making sure we're taking into account any SEO notes, anything like that. The human is ultimately the one responsible for all of those. We are improving our AI prompts, again, literally daily to make sure we can incorporate more of that as we go, but ultimately it comes down to the human there.
And I have been one of these humans. So I'm going to, in a couple slides here, I'll talk about some of the editing pieces, but I can't emphasize enough how much this is changing, because I was on Jimmy's podcast. We recorded a couple weeks ago. I think the episode's coming out very soon. And I talked about how we were editing things paragraph by paragraph. And at one point we were doing that, and that has already changed. So this hybrid stuff requires a lot of iteration, and it requires a lot of kind of back and forth. And I mean that both in terms of the writer with the AI and in terms of figuring out the use case and optimizing the process for the use case. So however you use the humans and the AI together to generate content is probably not how the next company over or the next content marketer over is using it. And that's okay. I think that speaks to the robustness of the tool. We've done this for a bunch of different use cases now. So the idea is we're just trying to share as much as we can. And so because it's been changing so much, GPT-4 has led us to completely rewrite the slide in the last 48 hours.
Yeah, so if you don't know, GPT-4 was released a couple weeks ago. And so it's powering both. There's the premium ChatGPT model where you can use it, and you can also use it through OpenAI's API, which is how we're doing it. If you are building content at scale, you really need to be going through the API, right? You can use ChatGPT for your own work for one-off stuff, but we're doing this for lots of clients, hundreds of thousands of pieces of content. We've got to figure out how to be doing it at scale, doing it programmatically. That requires the API. So I will just call out a couple notes here. Experimenting with the prompts is really, really important. I had that screenshot of the previous OpenAI playground. GPT-4 doesn't have a playground available that you can use. I ended up building my own, just in a Python Colab notebook where I'm experimenting with different prompts. Yeah, casual. But that's been really important before you build this out, like in any sort of system. Like you really need to be playing around with the prompts and figuring out what works for your specific use cases. Obviously, use GPT-4. Don't use the previous DaVinci models. They were great. GPT-4 is significantly better. When you are coming up with those prompts, providing a sample of what you want is often going to be more effective than telling it what you want it to do. So if I can give it an intro paragraph or a example blog post that's really in the tone that I want, that's going to get me better results than trying to describe what I'm looking for. Make sure you give it enough context. The max tokens thing, in the previous, with GPT 3.5, it was really important to limit how much it was going to write for you at a time. Otherwise, it was really likely to go off the rails. GPT-4 does way better with this, which is a super exciting thing to see. It means you can do fewer prompts and you can get more back at one time, expedites that process. So that's been really cool. I also kind of one more structural thing with writing with the AI is, giving it a more detailed outline is really important to make sure that it's going to cover the things that you want it to cover. So you can give it a super generic, just a couple bullet items, and it will talk about those. But you're the one who should be putting the thought into here of like, okay, if we're talking about this topic, what are the things that my reader wants to see? What is it? What are they going to be expecting to see? And then by you including those in the outline, the AI will talk about those, but you need to give it that guidance up front. So just making a more detailed outline than you would with a human writer. And then as OpenAI, as this stuff gets more popular, like the outages and the lag time with OpenAI has been rough. So if you are, building your business on this, make sure you've got some safeguards in place for that, because you will experience delays. Probably a lot of you have seen like ChatGPT just be unavailable or be down because it's reached its max limit. And that happens with the API as well. So just something a little nuanced to keep in mind and make sure you're prepared for.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the editing. And these are lessons from the trenches. Editing AI content feels super high stakes, right? There's like psychological trauma that goes along with knowing that if you let the robot make a mistake, it could be a true hallucination, a total just incorrect fact, right? And so like the fact checking is very important. I'm not going to read this bullet by bullet. I'll just say from a style and usage standpoint, I saw the comment about like, is it worth it? One of the things that I've noticed is so hard about editing AI content is that it is designed to vary its language. So you can't get into a flow, right? You edit a bunch of words from one human and you get a sense for what they're doing and how they write. And the editing becomes easier over time. And the AI doesn't let you do that, which is wildly frustrating. If you didn't get the style guide into the prompt up front for the AI, you're going to need to pay really close attention to that. That's a place where having Megan's process has felt so good to me. We had a client that wanted no Oxford commas. A person's a monster, by the way. But I didn't have to worry about that, right? I didn't have to go take out all my Oxford commas. The AI didn't put any Oxford commas in because we told it not to. Be really careful with jargon and like lexicon, because that's going to be something that the AI thinks it knows how to do because it's predicting the next word, but it will often not put it in the sentence in a way that like a subject matter expert would. So when you are editing AI content and you see a word that you know is like really specific to the subject matter, that's the time to read the sentence twice. I've caught the AI doing that a ton. I built a long form article about keyword research, and it struggled with that. It kept trying to do things, and then it kept trying to do things like passive voice, and there was other stuff like that to check with. Have a thesaurus handy. My record is I got the AI started 5 paragraphs with additionally, comma. Obviously, I've changed 4 of those. So checking for the repetition, that kind of stuff is a big piece. That kind of stuff does get into a rhythm because the AI makes those same mistakes over and over and over again. It's editing paragraph by paragraph, getting into a flow is the hard part. So practice does make perfect on this stuff. It does get easier as you do it, even if you don't ever really achieve that beautiful flow state. I'm looking at our time. We're going to cook through these next couple slides. We've built close to 3,000 of these things, and we have learnings from all these use cases. So I'm going to hand it back over to Megan.
Yeah. So these are what we've done historically. These are already expanding new use cases. It does do best on shorter content. Again, it's expanding, getting better at long, but that's where it really is a sweet spot. And so we've done a lot of local and franchise content, which is just, again, super easy to scale. But in terms of industry, the cool thing to see is that it's really industry agnostic. So we've handled all different kinds of industries, and we haven't had a problem with that. The biggest trick there is just making sure that for the specific type of content within that industry, that we are adjusting our prompts and all of that accordingly. And also using writers that are versed in those industries, right? Because then they also have an easier time of fact checking. For them is a lot easier if they're already familiar with, say, the legal space, and so they know what to be looking for and things like that. And then when it comes to actually delivering, that's where we get to leverage all of the stuff that we already had in place at Verblio for delivering content at scale. We have our managed services team. We have custom workflows. We can, import content or export content directly to a customer CMS. And so that's all stuff that we fortunately already had in place, that now just gets to be scaled up even further as we're creating more content using AI. And again, we had those freelance writers. So it's just, we already had that network. It's just been a matter of helping them understand, okay, when it comes to editing AI content, it is a slightly different beast than just writing content as a freelance writer, right? There are those specific things to look out for that Ryan mentioned. And so providing them the resources, making sure that they understand, what to be looking for, what are those really important things to check. That's all been part of our process as well.
I'll let everybody read some of these sample titles. These are the kinds of things we've been building. I was the editor on Buyer Beware: How to Avoid Window Replacement Scams. So these are real things. And what I was gonna mention was that these processes that we've gotten to put in place that we already knew because we've built so much human content over the past 10 years. That means that whatever you've been doing process-wise, you can apply here. Like, you have a starting place that has worked for us at scale. That will also work for you. So don't stop doing what's already working just because you're adding AI to the mix, I guess would be my advice there. I'm going to keep cooking. Some other learnings. Do you want to, you go, Megan, you do this part.
Yeah. So the way that this all started was because we were working with a client and we produced some human crafted AI content for them just as like a sample, and they preferred it to the human only content that they were getting from other vendors. That was literally our first pilot that came onto this product, which was really cool to see. And that was awesome feedback to hear. At this point, we've got about 50 writers that are trained on this process, and we are adding more literally every week as we add more beta clients here. So that's been cool to see. It's also been cool to see just like the actual curiosity from the writers, right, who are excited to learn how to use this technology and understanding kind of its nuances. And then also just in general, and this is an average, but typically articles take about half the time to produce when we're using AI as they would if this were purely human. The cool thing for us and anybody who's worked with freelancers is that we've had every single piece completed on time so far for our clients, which when you're doing it at this scale is impressive. And that's been exciting to see too. And then finally, that last bullet I want to explain, because basically what our writers have reported is that because the AI is providing them that kind of initial draft they're then reviewing, they're able to spend more time on like the actual editing for quality, making sure that it's following the brief, all of those qualitative things versus just getting words on a page, right? So they're able to put their time into things that actually elevate the quality of that piece, things that the client actually cares about versus writing out some of those pieces that are more rote. And so that's been, for us, that's the side that I'm really excited about, is like, how can we not just create content faster and cheaper, but improve the quality of it as well?
And the other piece of feedback that didn't make the slide here is we asked a couple folks to go back and write a piece entirely as a human with no AI help, and it was hard again. So it does become part of your process pretty quickly. It's impressive how easy it is to kind of internalize that tool usage. Google can add as many letters to the acronym as they want, and I'm going to keep making food puns about EEAT. How do you get the EEAT into these AI pieces? And this is tricky, right? Because I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. We're not talking about pristine thought leadership here. We are not trying to build a product review that competes with Wirecutter or getting a psychiatrist to review an article on antidepressants. That's real EEAT. That is so far beyond what AI is capable of. And I want to be really clear that that's not what we're suggesting you use AI to do. We are adding human experience to what the AI generates, right? And that starts with examples. The AI is terrible at using an example. So put them in yourself. Right? Adding an example can be sentences that stand alone. And this is also an excuse for me to use the word shibboleth. Use a shibboleth. Use something that is a marker to others that you know what you're talking about. That's something really deeply ingrained within a subculture or with the subject matter experts. This is your chance to cite sources. EEAT is also to some extent about getting the basics right. Put images in. Make sure they have alt tags. Make sure your internal linking structure makes sense, right? There's some SEO content marketing 101, well, maybe that's like 201 stuff that like feels really important that we tend to autopilot. And when you're working with AI content, you need to make sure you get that stuff exactly right. And then finally, this is a Ryan Law thing that has become just I stake my life on this one. You got to deliver on your promises. If your article says it's going to do something, you better damn well do it. And that is at the heart of meeting search intent and producing great content. So that's how you get the EEAT back into something that the AI is helping you produce quickly. Okay, changing gears. We're talking about AI detection and how to figure out if AI content is already on your website, maybe. So I'll turn it over to Megan.
Yeah, so this is an important thing if you are worried about, obviously, like there are risks involved with using AI in content. Who knows what Google will decide. My personal take is that Google wants good content and doesn't really care how it's created. But that said, we still provide human-only content to our customers, and it's really important for us to make sure that if customers believe that they're buying human-only content from us, that is what they are getting. So we currently use Originality.ai. We've tested a lot of different tools. That one was the best one that we found. I froze again. Am I still here?
Yeah, I got you.
Cool.
You're good.
Okay. All right. As long as you can hear me, we're good. That's the best one we found. It provides a score. Hopefully you all know this, but when you use a AI detection tool, it's going to give you typically it will give you back a percentage. That is not saying that, X percentage of the content was written by AI. That is its assessment of the likelihood that that piece of content was written by AI. So important nuance to understand there. Y'all are frozen. I'm going to keep talking.
Keep going.
Cool. Okay. And OpenAI does have their AI detection tool that's been released, but there's no API for it. So that's why we're not able to use that one at scale. But again, the important thing here is that you can always get false positives with these tools. Our advantage is that because of our marketplace, we can actually run thousands of tests. So we are currently running every piece of content on our platform through originality.ai. So we're able to see trends by writer, trends by customer, and look at this as more than just a one-off thing. Because again, as if anyone's tried these tools, you've probably put in something that you fully wrote and it gave you back some non-zero percentage, right? That can happen. You can get false positives, you can get false negatives. So being able to do it at scale and evaluating trends that way has really, for us, been the most valuable way of using these tools.
And it's subjective, right? That some of this is like, it's like plagiarism. There are cases that are clearly, definitely plagiarism, clearly, definitely not, and there's some stuff in the middle. And the AI tool is also trying to negotiate that like middle ground and that subjective piece. We have some pretty graphs. So when we just plug in AI content, this is one of the reasons we chose originality.ai. It almost always scores 90% or higher, as the 90% likelihood or more that it was written by AI. When we plug in the stuff with all of our brief and prompt stuff up front, that kind of initial AI content that we intend to hybridize even more, we get somewhere around 75%. And then once humans go and edit it, it drops well below 40% on average. So this is, I think, what we're trying to say here is when you go build hybrid content, the detection tool recognizes that it is no longer purely AI content. I don't think we're trying to say anything more than that. Megan?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. So some results. I want to be really clear about this graph. We took the first week of content for each of these years that was submitted to Verblio's platform, and we plugged it in. We wanted to see like what's going on here. And this is not the whole thing. The graph of all of our content we're keeping to ourselves. But this still represents a sample size of thousands of pieces. And you can see the median score. So median likelihood, right? This is not saying that 5% of our content in 2019 was AI generated, right? That's that the median score for that 1 week of content was below 5%. So it is capable of generating false positives. All we're trying to show here is once ChatGPT came out, people started trying to use it to build content, not edited enough, and submit it as though it were human content. This is out there in the real world. Unscrupulous folks are trying this. Or maybe to give them the benefit of the doubt, they're using ChatGPT and they haven't quite figured out how best to edit or what really needs to change to humanize the content appropriately. It's very possible some of this was written with best intent and needed to be changed more. Same kind of things going on here. This is how many posts kind of broke our threshold of being 80% likely that it was AI. You'll notice the graph spikes again after ChatGPT comes out, and we banned these writers. If you've submitted 12 things in like a day and they all scored 90%, you're just using AI and you're not actually submitting human content to the platform anymore, and you're not welcome to be a Verblio writer. So that goes to what Megan was saying about like if you're paying for human generated content, you should be getting the real thing. Like you should be getting a facsimile. So did I leave anything out here, Megan?
No, I do think though this does speak to the case of false positives, right? Because the odds that any content on our platform was AI generated in 2019 is pretty low, and 2020 as well. But again, this just shows that you can get a higher score even on fully human content.
Yeah. We did test OpenAI's new tool. We'll just blow through this really quickly. You can see it mostly agrees with originality.ai. I found it interesting that there were 7 instances where OpenAI said, I'm not sure, maybe this is AI generated, and Originality was like, this is probably AI. So there's disagreement amongst the tools. And we deliberately seeded this 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 of human AI and modified. So like, there should be a range of scores here, and both tools did this. So we like Originality. It's not there are other options out there, and they generally agree, but they also do disagree. Okay, I think we're actually doing pretty well on time. GPT-4 is here, and Megan has been studying it and working with it every day, and this is my favorite personal injury attorney in the country. So 4 things about ChatGPT-4.
was gonna say we could just leave it on that slide. I think it's fantastic. So GPT-4, I haven't been paying attention fully to the chat. Somebody asked about access to the API. We got access to the API way back right after it first came out. And so we're using it actually in a few different ways. Again, I'm using it directly through my own code. We're also using it through kind of an Airtable interface, basically, that we've hooked up on the back end to be able to use this with the writer. So that's kind of the tech side of how we're doing that. But a few things that I want to point out, I'm probably going to say more than 4, forgive me. First is that before GPT-4 was released, the big thing that you were probably hearing about it was that it's going to be multimodal. It's going to be able to accept text and images. That is not here yet. They're doing that. They started with just a single kind of test client for that. And so that will be released soon probably, but we don't know when that is. For the moment, it's still just text to text. The second thing that I want to call out, which is maybe the thing I'm most excited about, is that it now accepts larger inputs. So the token limit for GPT 3.5 was around 4,000. Now the base model is up to 8,000. There's also a 32K model, which is really exciting. And why that matters is because you can now give it more inputs. You can give it more context. So we mentioned that hub and spoke model. On GPT 3.5, you wouldn't be able to give it a really long pillar page and then still have it write content based on that, just because of the size of the model and how much content it would accept. Now you can. So that also is cool because obviously, again, GPT-4 is not connected to the internet when you're using it directly. And so you can now use that higher token limit to give it more of that context that it would otherwise be lacking. So that's super cool, makes for a lot of cool things. You can just give it a lot more information. And I already mentioned that if you have it write longer, it now does a much better job of actually staying on track. So that's cool. Third thing, I don't usually laugh while reading research papers, but when I was reading OpenAI's research paper for GPT-4, I actually laughed out loud because early on they're talking about basically the scope of the paper and what they're going to cover. And it says a line like, because of the competitive nature of this space and safety concerns, we won't be talking any more about the architecture, the data set, basically anything else about the model and how it's set up, which is a big departure for OpenAI. With GPT-3 and that, they were much more transparent about the data set they were using, what the architecture looked like, all of that sort of thing. So that's something, if you were interested in the space, that's a change. And the data set thing is interesting because that's actually, that's really important to know what these models are trained on, right? These are what's going to be feeding any biases they have, the accuracy. So that's something that I personally would really like to know is what are the data sets? What are the size of the data sets? But unfortunately, we don't know that for GPT-4. The final thing I want to say is that you've probably seen the graph of the test results of GPT-4 and how it's doing on everything from bar exams to AP exams and how it does significantly better than the previous model. And that's super exciting, especially on the LSAT and the bar exam. The size of its improvement over GPT 3.5 is really, really cool. That said, there are still hallucinations, as they're called. And so that's still always a risk with anytime you're using any of these models, that they might say something, say it very confidently, and it's completely false. So something you need to keep in mind with that. But that's that. All of that said, GPT-4, I've been using it a ton over the last couple of weeks, and it is significantly better than the previous model. Sometimes it's in ways that are harder to quantify. It's just this sounds slightly more human, and it sounds more natural. It does a much better job of actually the outlines it provides are much better than what we were getting previously. They go much more in depth. They go beyond just benefits of X, the disadvantages of X. What is X? They go much more in depth that way to actually add in more nuance, more context, more related things that somebody might be wondering about for a topic. So there have been significant improvements there. If you haven't tried it, again, I highly recommend that you do. And I'm excited to see where it goes from here, because we know it's going to keep evolving and keep improving. So,
yeah, the training data thing, the best example I've heard and this is I don't have the source handy, but was they wanted an AI to help screen for skin cancer, right? So like dermatologists could use it to help identify if your mole or whatever was potentially cancerous, and the training data set it up so that there was always a ruler in the frame measuring the size of the thing on your skin. And the AI took that to mean that if there's a ruler in the picture, it must be cancer. And right, and like we would have never figured that out if the training data set hadn't been available and part of the like that was how they identified that bias in AI. And like that's a big one. Like that we're literally talking about cancer here. Okay, I saw a bunch of questions. So there's a summary slide. You've been here. We this is what we talked about. So let's I'm going to leave this URL up if you want to see more AI stuff, and we'll answer questions.
Cool. Megan, Ryan, that was so good. That was just so interesting. We do have a number of questions. So we've got 7 minutes. I think let's just do our best to get through as many as we can.
And by all means, like both Megan and I are in Superpath. So if your question, we don't get to your question, like ask us in Superpath.
Love it. I'm not going to necessarily go in order here. Like I said, I'll do my best to get through all these. There was one question that did stand out to me. Do any of your are any of your clients fussy about the AI content percentage? I sort of thinking back to maybe 2018 or so when we first started using ClearScope at Animals, and then all of a sudden ClearScope got popular and all the customers would say, make sure it's an A+, and we would say it's thought leadership content or it's a case study. So there was like some education there. Are you finding that even for whether customers are signing up for hybrid AI content or human generated, that is a point of discussion?
Yeah. So when I will say for clients who are signed up for us with human craft AI content, we haven't had anybody who wants to hit a certain AI detection score or anything like that. For them, it's all about how they read it and how the quality of the content appears to them. We have had some clients who purchase our human only content who want to make sure that like they haven't even said anything about a percentage score that they're looking for, but they do want to know that like, hey, what are you guys doing about AI on your platform? Do you think it's a risk? And that's why we implemented that check. And I think somebody asked about like, since we're doing hybrid AI content, like what are we saying when we talk about, AI detection and like that using AI in content is bad? And for us, it's the biggest thing is just that, our clients, they have different risk appetites, right? If we have a client who thinks that AI content is bad, like we want to respect that and make sure that we are, in fact, regardless of the quality of the content, that we are doing our part to make sure it was human created. And so that's more of just almost a reputation brand thing for us. If they want human content for whatever reason, even if I think it's okay to use AI strategically in your content, if they don't, we want to be mindful of that. So,
got it. Someone else asked about, is there a way to prompt AI to use general SEO best practices while writing? Have you all experimented with that? I think that's a really interesting question because I could imagine you say, make sure you use X keyword 10 times, make sure the subheads include these keyword, things like that. I don't know if it makes the content better or worse, saves you time later or not. So if you all have had a chance to experiment with that, we'd be curious about your experience with it.
Yeah, we've done some cool stuff with that. And I was delighted the first time that I put in some SEO guidelines for a piece. And I was actually using Surfer at the time. And the difference between when I gave the AI Surfer's guidelines versus when I didn't and how it scored in Surfer was really, really impressive. So yes, we have played around with that prompt. I would say just telling it to use in general, like to use best SEO practices is not particularly effective, but giving it specific guidance on keywords, headings, sections to include, that sort of thing, that does have good results. So you need to do that work yourself, obviously, right? Or you need to be, if you're using a tool, ClearScope or Surfer, you need to be using one of those. It's not going to do that keyword research. Again, it's not hooked up to the internet. It's not doing that sort of analysis. But if you feed it in the results of that, it will do a better job of hitting that mark in your content.
Really cool. I'm kind of just bouncing around here, trying to capture a few different topics here. Megan, you had mentioned putting some safeguards in place because of outages with ChatGPT. Is that as simple as just like copying and pasting stuff out on a regular basis so you have it somewhere else, or is there a more sophisticated approach you've come up with?
Yeah, and so in ChatGPT, I'm not even sure. I don't use that much since I go solely through the API at this point.
Got it.
So safeguards there. I would recommend copying and pasting. For us, it's more a matter of it will take longer for an article to be generated. A writer might experience like a timeout issue. And so for us, it's just a matter of, first of all, identifying what's happening and what's the error. Is it something that's actually gone wrong in the process, in the flow, or is it simply a timeout error? One thing I would like to do is, I mentioned GPT-4 is so much better than GPT 3.5. However, as a potential backup option, right, you could use a different model. We started looking at even just models that aren't from OpenAI. So just having kind of a wider portfolio of models to use, I think will become more important. For the most part, I'm also hoping that OpenAI is going to actually like scale up its resources and as they get used to the volume of traffic on their sites, I think they're going to do a better job of supporting that. I think we're in this rough phase now where like it scaled up so quickly. But the biggest thing, if you're using ChatGPT, I think copy and pasting is probably as good as it gets, but I'm less familiar. And on the other end, it's mostly a matter of waiting for the outage to recede. And I will say OpenAI gives alerts as to when they have outages, but their alerts usually come after the outage has already been in place for a while and is close to being fixed. So take that with a grain of salt.
Got it. Any suggestions for informing or training freelance writers that you work with? And my initial thought was that would apply mostly to agencies, but actually would probably apply to kind of anybody who works with freelancers, whether you're in-house or agency. I'm imagining at the very least you want to have some basic guidelines in place on expectations, so that if you're the editor assigning pieces, you have a sense of how much or how little AI a writer would be using to get stuff back to you.
Yeah, you mean like guidelines for if they are intentionally using it, or if they aren't, or just in general?
I think just in general. So like in your case, like, you've sort of run some freelancers through like how to create a better brief, better inputs, things like that. Like, should everybody have that? Like, I guess, should anybody who's working with freelancers have training in place so that the content that is assigned meets a certain expectation when it's written and delivered?
Yeah, the biggest thing I would say is, first of all, just establish expectations up front of like, what tools are they using and what tools are you okay with them using, right? If you don't want them to be using any AI, establish that up front and make sure they know that. And I personally would be curious to know what tools they're using. If I were working with freelance writers, I'd be curious to know like, hey, are you using AI to do this and how? And then I think it's just a matter of making sure they know if they're using AI, the biggest thing that would carry the biggest risk for your brand would obviously be the fact checking and bias that could be present. And so making sure that they're familiar with that. I think my personal opinion on this is that it's kind of the onus is on the freelancer. If they're using AI tools, like, you should be knowing how to use them, right? And maybe that's, I don't know, controversial. I don't know, but it's like any other tool. If you're using it, make sure you know enough to know how to use it effectively. And otherwise you probably shouldn't be. So if you're a freelancer listening to this, put in the time to learn how to use these tools, know what you need to do to that content to make it actually meet the quality expectation, and then also be transparent with your client if you are, if you're using it. That's what I would say. Ryan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the transparency is really key. Like, understanding how. So much of this is about choosing the right tool for the job. So like, if there's agreement about choosing the right tool and when to use it, and then getting the experience with it. So like, we're talking about freelancers, the more time you've got with the tool, the better. And so it's a great like, I'm not saying like do extra work, but if you can spend time in there, then you're off to a great start.
Totally. Cool. There's so many more questions. We're just about out of time here. I would really encourage folks to take Ryan and Megan up on the opportunity to shoot them a message in the Superpath Slack community. I'm going to export all these questions. I'll save them. So maybe we can go back and forth, Ryan and Megan, about, maybe I'll post some of these in Slack to be answered publicly for the benefit of everybody. We will be sending a recording out. We'll also send out some of the links that were mentioned here. We'd really encourage folks to go and check out Verblio's AI resources. They've been doing some really intelligent writing. If you liked this webinar, which sounds like a lot of people did, you're going to like stuff they're publishing on the site too. So Ryan and Megan, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Take care, everyone.